When my son was 2 years old, he started acting as if he was interacting with something, or someone, that his father and I could never see. Like throwing toys down the hallway, and then running away murmuring words. When I asked what he was doing, he always told me he was giving toys to the boy for him to play with. There was never anybody there, but it was always icy cold down that hallway, and leading into the garage. I'd ask him what the boy's name was, and he would tell me Don was his name. I asked what the boy was doing. Waiting for his mom to pick him up, he would always reply. We put it down to an imaginary friend, and nothing more. Harmless, we thought. Until he started waking up in the middle of the night, screaming, saying, "Don won't let me sleep. He keeps tickling my toes." This sent chills down my spine, and so my son would sleep in my bed with me every night. This continued for another 6 months, until the real estate notified us that the owner of the house had died, and his children would be selling the property and splitting the profit between them, meaning we had to move. After we left, I came across a local news article about the owner of our old rental, stating how much he will be missed by the community. He had been raised by his mother in the house he was renting since he was a child. Then I noticed his name, and everything came flooding back to me. His name was Don. My son's imaginary friend was our homeowner. He must have been waiting for his mother to come to take him to the other side. I'll never look at imaginary friends the same. My friends and I have a podcast where we tell scary stories. This is one that is infamous in my family, and that I grew up hearing and telling. Back in the 80s, my Aunt Kay was in her early 20s. This is before she married my uncle, and when she would drive long distances back and forth between her parents and my uncles to visit. It was a transitional period for them. She had just graduated, and she hadn't moved out yet to be with him. It was a long drive across several states, through the desert, which took her hours. This desolate highway would have stretches of road that lasted hundreds of miles where you quite often wouldn't see another driver, let alone a gas station. So Aunt Kay set out and began one of these journeys. A couple of hours into the drive, Aunt Kay noticed a dark vehicle slowly catching up to her. She barely noticed as she continued to sing along to Les Miserables until the vehicle got aggressively close. She turned off the music and looked into her rearview mirror, seeing the vehicle flash its brights, and a hand pointing at her car and motioning to pull over. Alarmed, she quickly slowed and began to look for a good place to pull off the road to see what must be wrong with her car. The second she began to pull off the road, she said she felt and heard as clear as day, "Don't pull over." Then again, "Don't pull over." Call it God, intuition, or just a gut feeling, but a jolt of adrenaline and fear shot through Aunt Kay's body as she hit the gas and peeled back onto the highway. Heart pumping, Aunt Kay silently asked herself what the hell was that, as she saw the vehicle peel out behind her. The dark vehicle continued to closely follow, flashing their brights and motioning to her to pull over. Fear and confusion set in as Aunt Kay began to question what was going on. Why was the driver motioning for her to pull over? Was there something wrong with her car? And what the hell was that warning she felt? It would have been a severe situation if her car had broken down out there, especially before cell phones. But she pressed on. Just as her resolve wavered, she started questioning if she truly did feel what she felt. She started slowing back down when the dark vehicle picked up speed. It entered into the oncoming traffic lane and came level to my aunt's car. The driver smiled, pointed, motioned, and mouthed the words, "Pull over," to my aunt. She said the second she looked into his eyes, she felt pure evil. She felt a horribly sick feeling in the pit of her stomach, and again heard the words in her head, "Don't pull over." She described him as looking scary, greasy, and noticed he was missing a couple of teeth in his smile that she'll never forget. that sent chills through her. This quickly dispelled any thought she had of pulling over, and she put the pedal to the metal to try to lose him. He chased after her. She slowed down. He slowed down. She sped up. He sped up. It got to the point that he began to try to push her car off the road. Aunt Kay was at the point of tears as this creep continued to terrorize her alone, out in the middle of nowhere. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Aunt Kay sees a couple of semis off in the distance. She felt if only she can get close, or even get in between those trucks, she would be safe, so she took off. He continued to flash his lights, honk his horn, and try to hit her car, until she got close enough to the trucks. As she got in between them, she saw the dark vehicle slow way down, and eventually disappear from view. She stayed with the trucks for a couple of hours, until she felt safe enough to pull over at a gas station and cry. Fast forward several years later, my aunt and uncle are married. He's working at a law firm as a high-profile criminal prosecutor in Las Vegas. She's now a full-time mom of several young children. Since I've known my aunt, she's been obsessed with true crime. Dateline, 2020, and Unsolved Mysteries were always playing at their house. This day was no different. She was folding laundry in the kitchen while listening to the TV in the other room. The interviewer was asking about a man who was being interviewed on death row. As she paired another match of socks, she heard the man describe one of his tactics for procuring victims. According to him, he would wait along the side of the highway. A car would go by with a family, and he'd wait. Another car with a male driver would go by, and he'd wait. But every so often, a car would go by with a pretty woman driving alone. So I'd pull out behind and follow him. I'd flash my brights, honk, and motion for him to pull over. Aunt Kay, paralyzed, continued to listen. When they would eventually pull over, I'd tell them to pop the hood, and I'd be able to tell them what was wrong with their car. They would, and I'd yank a couple wires. When the car wouldn't start, I'd tell them no problems. My buddy has a shop in the next town. I can give you a ride, and he'll give you a fair deal. My aunt slowly moved to the living room. They'd get in, and I'd rape and kill him. Bury him anywhere in the desert. When asked how many times he did this, he responded, "They'll never find all the bodies. I can't even count." And how many got away? 2 or 3? My aunt stood there, alone, staring into the same toothless grin she saw on that highway, that day. It was Henry Lee Lucas. I was 18 years old when this happened. At the time, I was living at home with my parents, who had recently moved far out into the countryside. Their farm was a part of a tiny rural cluster, about 7 farms on one road. That night, I was home alone with our dog, a large Labrador I was looking after, until my parents came back the next day. It was around 11 p.m. I was lying on the upstairs couch with a movie playing quietly on the TV, half asleep, and relaxed in the stillness of the house. Then, 3 loud knocks shattered the silence. They came from the front door downstairs, the door directly at the bottom of the staircase leading up to where I was. The sound was sharp and deliberate, not hesitant, not accidental. My dog sprang out of his bed beside me and started barking immediately. I tried to calm him, but he was beyond listening. He bolted down the stairs and positioned himself in front of the door, barking and growling into the darkness. Outside, the courtyard was completely black. I stood halfway down the staircase, my pulse hammering in my ears, and calling out, "Hello?" No reply, just silence. I called again, louder this time. Still nothing. The quiet that followed felt wrong, thick and watchful. After a moment, that felt much longer than it was, I forced myself to move. I stepped down the rest of the stairs, my dog still tense at the door. Carefully, I opened it just enough to lean my head outside. There was nothing there. No lights, no movement, no footsteps fading away. Only the dark courtyard and the cold night air. It felt like whoever, or whatever, had knocked had simply vanished. I shut the door quickly and locked every entrance in the house. My hands were shaking as I called my parents. They immediately contacted our neighbors, a couple who lived nearby. Within minutes, they arrived. I explained what had happened, still trying to steady my voice. They decided to walk around the barns and check the property. Those 10 minutes felt endless. When they returned, they said they hadn't found anything. Still, they strongly suggested I come sleep in their guest room for the night. I told them it was probably just me overreacting, if nothing had been found. But they kept insisting, more seriously than I expected, that I would be safer to come with them. I refused. I couldn't leave my dog alone. Before leaving, they told me to call immediately if anything else happened, no matter how small. When my parents returned the next day, they installed surveillance cameras outside the front door. They said it was to make me feel safer, especially since I was often home alone with the dog. A few months later, my parents were celebrating their 25th anniversary. During the evening, I found myself talking to my female neighbor and thanked her again for coming over that night. Her expression shifted. She went quiet for a moment, like she was weighing whether to say what was on her mind. Then she told me she had to be honest with me. That night, shortly before my parents called her, she had been outside saying goodnight to her horses. The yard was completely still. No wind, no distant cars, nothing. That's when she heard it. Footsteps. Clear, deliberate footsteps crunching the gravel in our courtyard. Not random, not hurried. Slow, controlled, like someone walking with purpose in the dark. She said the sound carried unnaturally well in the silence. Then the footsteps stopped, right there in the yard. She waited to hear them continue, to hear someone speak, a door, anything. But there was only a heavy, suffocating silence. And just moments later, my parents called her about the knocking. She told me she'd never heard those footsteps leave.